Rabbi Abadie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Charles, and Your Excellency, Dr. Ali. It's such a pleasure and honor to be sitting with you here at this panel, although we are thousands of kilometers away. It's a pleasure and honor, and of course, pleasure and honor to be with the Honorable Natan Sharansky, a legend in the Jewish, not just the Jewish, the whole world, and Dr. Satlov. Pleasure and honor. So I will speak about the Abraham Accords from my vantage point as a rabbi, as a spiritual leader, and to say that the Abraham Accords have infused a new life into the Jewish community of the Emirates and also of the entire Gulf. And I say new life because there was a small Jewish community, as Dr. Ali mentioned, before the Abraham Accord. There were probably less than 200 individuals, which I visited twice before the Abraham Accords. And now, as Dr. Ali mentioned, we probably have 1,000 and something, but we know of 600 that are active and members of the community. And so this new life has really given a pride and a resurgence of Jewish life in the entire region. To think that when I was there for the first time 3 years ago in 2019, in that small community of less than 200 people, there was one place of prayer, was the villa, and it was, of course, with the tacit approval of the government, but it was not known much about it around. And people used to go there in a very quiet way and everything. They celebrated the holidays and Shabbat and everything. But it was pretty quiet. Very, very few people knew about it. And now, and of course there was no kosher restaurants, there was no kosher hotels, there was no mikveh, there was no Jewish nursery. And now only 2 years later, even less than 2 years, when I already got there, the first kosher restaurant opened up. And that's 4 months after less than 4, I was there 2 months after the Abraham Accord. And so in 2 months, there was already kosher food. So now we have 6 kosher restaurants, several hotels that provide kosher food on a permanent basis, and there is a law that every single tourist who requires kosher food can demand from the hotel that he or she is staying 24 hours in advance, and that hotel is obligated to provide that kosher meal. Nowhere in the world, not even Israel, have such rule for the tourists. And so you could be anywhere in the Emirates. If you're a Jewish tourist who would like to eat kosher, you don't have to be Jewish. If you want to eat kosher, you have to ask the hotel 24 hours in advance, and you're going to get that kosher food. Yeah, with a slightly premium cost, but you're going to get it. When you have a country who, before the incoming of the Israeli and Jewish tourists, required of every single hospitality worker, that means hotel workers, from the concierge to the receptionist to the bedroom maid to fix, to clean, to the cleaners, every single waiter and waitress in restaurants, they were required to take a course of 2 weeks, how to welcome Jewish tourists. I saw the syllabus. I was asked to advise on that course, and they were required that any employee in the tourist industry who does not take that course was relieved of his or her position. They have to have a certificate to be able to continue in their job. Which country, again, in such a small period of time, in which now not only there's one villa where there are prayers, there is 5 or 6 places that there are regular prayers, hotels, villas, and more hotels. And with a lot of people attending, there's no secrecy, everybody is known, they're publicized, social media is all over. There was already a minyan at the top of the Burj Khalifa, and that was around Hanukkah of 2020. Of course, it's not something that I condoned to have a public minyan at the top of Burj Khalifa, but to tell you how Jews feel free to exercise their faith with pride and with dedication, without any questions. What else I can tell you about the infusion of life in that? So it's not only in the UAE, it's also in the Bahrain. Bahrain is an ancient community, not so ancient, 140 years, we're not talking about centuries and millennia, but it's a community that in 1935 to 37 built their synagogue, was used for 11 to 12 years until 1948, and then they did not use it anymore because there were some riots against the Jews there. And then the Jews went into, not real hiding, but into very understated presence. They never attended the synagogue. The synagogue remained closed and locked until last year, after the Abraham Accord, in which the government of Bahrain and His Majesty the King was asking the Jewish community, why don't you use the synagogue that you have? Please use it. It's there to be used. Of course, it needed renovation. It was renovated, it was inaugurated, and now it's unused. So the community of Bahrain, who was kind of dormant for 70 years, now is alive and well. And of course, there's a hotel with full kosher food all the time in Bahrain. And so life for a Jew in the Gulf, not just in the UAE and Bahrain, but we have individual Jews in Saudi Arabia, we have individual Jews in Oman, and even in Kuwait and in Qatar. Kuwait and Qatar are much more, again, on the quiet side. Oman, there's 15 to 20 Jews. Some of them are professors, some of them are part of the diplomatic corps, in which they now want to exercise their faith, and they do it with pride. And so we founded the Association of Gulf Jewish Communities, which is an association of the Jewish communities and Jewish individuals in the 4 GCC countries, where we provide them with spiritual nourishment, with religious teaching, with holiday celebrations, matzah for Pesach and Haroset, shofar for Rosh Hashanah, lulav and etrog for Sukkot, Megillah reading for Purim, and it's in less than 2 years you have a region that is so welcoming, where Jewish life is growing, as was Dr. Sattloff mentioned this morning. Whereas the location and the place and the region where Jewish life has increased significantly more than anywhere in the world, it is that area, because of the welcoming, of the embrace that we are being given by the UAE primarily, and by the rest countries of the region. And I do believe soon things will open up, as Dr. Sattloff mentioned, at least for the observance of different faiths. And so the Abraham Accords really brought not just a new life, but a completely new reality to the region, where not just Jewish faith, but specifically Jewish faith is growing, is developing, is thriving, and will continue to do so. Now, the people that came to the Emirates to live prior to the Abraham Accords were mostly Jews that was not that important for them a Jewish life. They came there because their company must have asked them if they would want to relocate to Dubai, and Dubai is an exciting place, a beautiful place. They were Jewish because they were born Jewish or married to Jew, and they say yes. So kosher food, religious observance was not important. And yet, once the Abraham Accords were signed, even those same people felt such a sense of freedom, such a new life infused in them as Jews, even though they were not observing, they were not really practicing Jews. And so now we have Jews that are moving from France, from England, from the United Kingdom, from Geneva, from Belgium, of course from Israel, from the United States and Canada. And now they're moving because now they say not only we can move and work there, but we could live as Jews, as practicing, observing Jews. We have kosher food, we have mikveh, we have education, we have, of course, places of prayer. So it has changed the region completely. And I do believe, and I am very optimistic, that the entire region will eventually open up, change, and I think that will be I'm not a prophet, and I'm not a future, teller, a foreteller. But I'm going to bet that the region will become the next great diaspora of Jews, if you will. But it will be the closest one to Israel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, if you gentlemen would like to sit at the table, we'll take a few questions from the audience. And can we put on show the participants? Okay, so who has a question? Ben.
It is gratifying to see the potential international ramifications of this deal and the movement away from immediate existential threats from other states for Israel. But the way that I understand it, it is largely predicated on the power of Israel's economy, which is itself based in the modern day a lot on the investment and presence of Western-based transnational corporations who could, at the behest of their governments, leave at any moment, basically, because of the deals that they've established with the Israeli government, which may happen depending on the foreign government's opinions of Israel, which are often influenced by the Israeli-Palestine conflict. So my question is, could this lead to a more stable situation for itself, basically, by creating a better situation for Israel-Palestine? Or is it essentially hanging in the balance of our situation at home? Basically what I'm asking is this going to have ramifications for Israel-Palestine, or is it just international?
Well, I guess
Yeah.
Sure,
Yeah.
definitely. But it's not contingent on it. So, I'm sorry, you want me to use this thing?
Yeah.
Sure. There's definitely an impact. It goes both ways. There's definitely an impact of the Gulf-Israel relationship on the Israeli-Palestinian relationship. We saw this from day one. I mean, what were the Emiratis' condition to do normalization? It was that the Israelis suspend efforts to annex territory in the West Bank for a minimum of 4 years. We will begin to see how the Israelis define their own priorities in 2 years when those 4-year period comes to an end, and depending on what the government is in Israel, we'll see whether or not they choose to, go in the route of annexation, which I think is highly unlikely, or they want to build on the relationships that they've built within the Gulf. So that's one area in which there's the connection. The other area is the one where, at the other end of the spectrum, what you're suggesting, which is to what extent will progress between Israelis and Palestinians provide a firmer anchor for what Israel is doing with Arab states more broadly around the region. One hopes that that's the case, and you're seeing incremental movement in that direction. Palestinians are becoming a little bit more interested, for example, in what happened at the Negev summit and the creation of 6 different working groups of Israel and its peacemaking Arab states on all sorts of practical issues: food security, energy security, you name it. Now, they don't want to go all the way to join that because there's still this psychological barrier that it means giving up something. I think it's a big mistake analytically, but it's not my role to tell them they're right or wrong. But they want to get more involved in that, which is good. And the more involved that they do get, the better off everybody is, because as you say, it provides a firmer anchor for the regional stuff. But if you're asking me, does there have to be a final Israeli-Palestinian peace for this to survive? No. What there can't be is the opposite. There can't be the final end of any hope for Israeli-Palestinian peace. At that point, this is in trouble.
Yeah, well, I want to add a couple of things. First of all, I think it's wrong to believe that these agreements are mainly based on the power of big corporations and the interest of their involvement. Let's not be idealists. It started from the feeling of Iranian threat, and I can tell you that that's what I know from Israel diplomats and from our ambassador in Washington then, that the first telephones from Bahrainian and some other partners came, it's a very essential thing, but came after the speech of Prime Minister Netanyahu in the American Congress, the step which was highly criticized by many, but that's when some potential Arab partners understood that if there is some firm force against Iran, which will be not compromising even with the American position, it's Israel. So with all our idealism, the first was a very simple consideration, by the way, including Saudi Arabia, that we need urgently forces which will stand with us, or instead of us, or with us, against Iranian threat. Then, I think important thing is, Israel is by itself, in many ways, real superpower of high-tech and some other things of the Middle East. And Shimon Peres was dreaming, immediately with Oslo, he published a book about the new Middle East. He was dreaming that simply because Israel has a lot to propose to Arab nations, then because of their practical need to share economic success with Israel, they'll be interested. Of course, it was naive that, in fact, the relations with Arab countries became the prisoner of Israeli-Palestinian relations. It was clear that if there is no improvement in Israeli-Palestinian relations, there will be no improvement with Arab world. And here, I believe the most important factor is that that's, as I said, the accord which came from the bottom up. So it's desire of the people. It's not desire of some leader who came today and maybe will be overthrown tomorrow. And that is why it is much more stable than the other agreements. And that's why I believe it gives real hope, because I think what happened, at least in 30 years at the time in Israel, I came straight from Soviet prison to Israel, in these 30-something years, the major changes that I think overwhelming number of Israelis is not on the far left and not on the far right. Overwhelming majority, the question of peace with Palestinians is the question of security only. And being alone in the Middle East, like standing against everybody, that like this leadership, Palestinian leadership, which we impose on them, is saying to us, you want to have better relations, you'll have to give up on territories, and we know what's happening with this territory. They're turning into the launching pads for the terrorist attacks. It was impossible. But the more secure Israelis felt, and no doubt that Abraham Accord suddenly gives a lot of feeling of security to Israelis, the more open they are to very serious far-going deals with Palestinians. And on the other hand, I think the more and more Palestinians, first of all, it is businessmen who already were immediately interested. In fact, Abu Mazen tried to stop them, and the Americans said you can't stop them, and they already start being part of the many joint ventures which are happening. But then the other parts of society will follow. So yeah, I believe this Abraham Accords is a good push for both societies towards building peace. I think it will take time, but definitely in the right direction.
So I have a question more about the geopolitical question about the part that the United States has been playing in the Middle East. I feel like it's a bit erratic at some times. So in one hand, and this is how I perceive it, they're trying to build a deal with Iran, and the other hand, they're trying to build this block of security for all these other countries, or they're supporting it. So I would like to understand more if, where are they, you know, with this whole situation. I know there's two different governments, and that's part of it, but as an international analyst, it's kind of weird that they're doing both at the same time.
Good question. Well, look, we are now in the third administration in a row, Obama, Trump, Biden, whose basic premise is to lower Americans' profile in the Middle East and to diminish our vulnerability, our exposure to Middle East shocks and crises. This is the Trump and the Democrats agree on very little, but one of the things they did agree on, one of the things that Obama and Trump and Biden agree on is they wanted to shrink America's exposure in the Middle East. And so the question was how to do it. So Obama, his basic approach was to try to reach an accommodation with Iran that would limit the possibility, in his view, of a conflict with Iran and to compel our allies, our Arab allies, to themselves reach an accommodation with Iran. They didn't like this. They thought it was a cockamamie approach. And he is best known in the Middle East for an interview in which he gave in the Atlantic suggesting that Saudi Arabia and Iran, that Saudi Arabia should share the Persian Gulf with Iran, which the Saudis obviously didn't like. But the Iran nuclear deal, again, we can agree, we can disagree on it. I wasn't a fan, but the basic idea is to cap a terrible problem for any American administration and to kick it down the road a long way, or at least what seemed to be a long way in 2015. Donald Trump came in, had the same strategic objective. He wanted to get America out of everything, right? He wanted to get us out of NATO, wanted to get us out of Asia, wanted to get us out of the Middle East. He couldn't quite get us out, but he didn't want to keep us engaged. And so he ripped up the Iran nuclear deal, but he didn't put anything else in its place. He didn't offer a different alignment with our allies, really, to shore up our allies. When the Iranians attacked Saudi Arabia, as they did against the Aramco facilities, we did nothing. And so he was also known, other than his one bumping off an Iranian military leader, he was also known in the Middle East for actually not reacting to Iranian provocations. And then, Joe Biden, his first major step was to withdraw from Afghanistan, which went over like a lead balloon in the Middle East. Oh my God, it's a clear, visible sign of American retreat. Now, when he went to Riyadh and Jeddah a couple of weeks ago, I think the most interesting statement that he made, and it makes a lot more sense if you put together the timeline of the Zawahiri, the preparation for the killing of Zawahiri, which was occurring at the exact same time, was when he said in Jeddah, I've only come to realize how important it is to stay in this part of the world. Which doesn't mean that we're going to take on our enemies with new vigor, but it does mean that we're going to halt a further decline, a further departure. But the bottom line is that they all tend to agree. They just disagree on their tactics. But if you just want to, think about it one way. It's 32 years ago last week, that the United States made a commitment to repel Saddam's invasion of Kuwait. And we sent 500,000 soldiers, sailors, and airmen to the Middle East to do it. Numbers that are so beyond anything that any American could contemplate today. Today we're having a fight over whether we should have 500 guys in eastern Syria. We had 500,000 people in that conflict. And that just gives you a sense of how far the center of gravity of American strategy has moved over the last 30 years.
You might, just to carry on this point, for Rob, some will say a diminishing role of the United States in the region. Others look at the United States as a weakening power, a power that can no longer be relied upon. The fact that people in the Middle East or parties in the Middle East perceive the United States as weakening and something that can't be counted on as it was in the past, is this driving the coming together of different interested countries in the region? Is it a withdrawal of the United States promoting peace in the region?
So there are some who say that that the reason why the Emirates and the Israelis have found each other is because the departure of America from the region is leaving these small but powerful states on their own. Actually, I think that neither the Emirates nor the Israelis think that they're alone, and they still rely very much on the American role in the region. But that role has evolved. There's no doubt about it. I mean, one variation of that Saddam-Kuwait lesson that I mentioned a moment ago is something that I've heard a lot around the Middle East the last 6 months, which goes like this. It almost sounds like a Talmudic, you gotta imagine the intonation. If 30 years ago, America went all the way to the Middle East when a big country tried to swallow a small country and used its own forces to expel in a fairly insignificant place. And then 32 years later, America refuses to send one of its own forces to the heart of Europe when a big country tries to swallow a small country. And in effect, our policy in Ukraine is to fight to the last Ukrainian, right? We don't call it that, but that's really what our policy is. Then, if we live in the Middle East, what are the chances that America is ever going to come back here again to help defend a small country that gets eaten by a big country? Very, 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 very slim. What's the other lesson that many Middle Eastern governments take away from this? Why did America go into Kuwait but not into Ukraine? Why did we go and get rid of Saddam but not the North Koreans? Why did we get rid of Gaddafi? Some countries have nukes and other countries don't. And one of the sort of meta lessons that Middle Eastern leaders are taking from the current situation is if you have a nuclear capability, chances are far less likely that some big bad bully is going to come and try to swallow you up. And we have to worry about that over the next decade and more, that more and more Middle Eastern countries are going to think that getting nukes is in their interest.
But with this Talmudic wisdom, you can say that it is because of the diminishing role of America. Putin went to Syria and Putin went to Ukraine. And there is no doubt, that I know directly from people in Moscow, that this was the major factor for Putin to decide both things almost simultaneously, almost a few weeks. So America didn't respond then, but now when, because Russia went to Ukraine in such a frightening way for the free world, they are involved. They are not sending their soldiers, but they are unprecedentedly involved with others. So it gives the hope that then they will be more involved also in the Middle East.
I would say yes to this,
Yeah.
if that were the original American approach.
No, it
What was American policy when the Russians invaded Ukraine?
Yeah,
It was to offer Zelensky
yeah.
how to escape,
Yeah.
a ticket out.
And modern
And
things. Biden
only-
said, if it will be small aggression, we will not
And
interfere.
only when the Ukrainians showed remarkable resilience
Absolutely. Yeah.
did they compel a change in our policy. The change in policy did not come from inside us. It came really from the Ukrainians. And yes, we reacted appropriately. But let's remember what our original intention was,
Yeah.
which was, the Russians are going to overrun this country, and that'll
But
be
look, it didn't happen in Iran in 2009. Americans didn't respond to the readiness of Iranians to fight. So theoretically, it could not happen also
correct.
in Iraq. But thanks God,
Thank
the
you.
West was frightened enough by Putin, so they had to interfere.
Okay.
If I may just add, I'm not a politician, but from observation, it seems to be that that's the modus operandi of the United States. Whenever they see that a country that has been supported by the U.S. is being overrun, the first thing they do is to offer safe haven to the leader. We saw it in Iran in 1979. We saw it in Egypt with Mubarak, and we saw it plenty with other places. So it seems exactly in Tunisia also the same thing. So it seems that that's the modus operandi of the United States. They immediately backtrack or back off and allow, because they hope that the new regime will be on their side. And in many times they have been completely wrong about that. The same thing, they demanded the elections in Gaza, right? Democratic elections in Gaza, because they had hoped that if they show their goodness to the Hamas, to the leaders over there,
Yeah.
they're going to be on their side. So they were wrong in Iran, they were wrong in Egypt, they were wrong in Tunisia, and they were wrong in Gaza.
Yeah.
So, I don't dispute many of the specifics, but I think we often get the big things surprisingly right. As Churchill would have said,
Yes.
after exhausting all the other alternatives.
Yeah.
So whether it's supporting Israel, supporting this peace, supporting there's all sorts of things we do get right. But I think the questioner, I think you quite accurately pointed out that we do have an erratic, what many Middle Easterners view as an erratic approach. In fact, in terms of numbers, the actual numbers of American soldiers, sailors, and airmen in the Middle East has been remarkably constant for the last 20 years.
Really?
It's been about 30,000. It just seems that we don't use them to respond when the circumstances you would think that we would respond, whether it's in Syria or when they hit Aramco or when they hit the Emirates. You would think that we would use our forces to do things. The forces are there. It's the political decision whether or not to use them.
If I may add that, just briefly, from what I heard from some in the leadership of the UAE regarding if they feel that the United States has abandoned them, they didn't feel that the United States have abandoned them, but they do feel, or at least when I was told last year, they did feel that they cannot rely much on the United States. And the words that were used when they explained that to me was, we can no longer rely totally on the United States because we know what could happen. And if we have a country, a regional country that is powerful and it's on our side, then we would be foolish not to basically get together and have alliance with that.
I won't get into it, but there's also the withdrawal and the type of withdrawal from Afghanistan that sends shockwaves around the world. So final question, we're supposed to leave the room in 4 minutes. So, go ahead.
I have a short question, and I would like all of you to reply for such question. Today there are so many ideas that peace should come from. It can be agriculture, sustainability, medical projects, and so on. So I would like to hear if you would determine 3 main directions that peace should come from, what it would be? Thank you.
Well, I'll dare to say that, as I thought all these years, peace will come from developing civil society. And it seems like a crazy idea that developing civil societies in Arab countries. I was saying 20 years ago and say today that Arab society has the same right on the living in freedom as any other society. And the fact that we are ignoring this fact, trying to build peace, circumventing it, I think is a big mistake. The fact that today it's coming back, that's what gives me the big hope. Well, so freedom, then joining the modern high-tech world, the ideas, and that's definitely happening. Well, that's the thing that I see. There are definitely many answers. Yeah.
So it's with a bit of trepidation, but actually I take the opposite view,
Yeah.
which
And it will come from dictators.
it'll come from. Well, I prefer to say it'll come from leadership.
Well,
That leaders help to set the agenda for their nations. That I mean, some of this depends on what you define as peace. I mean, if we waited for what Natan, quite legitimately calls for, we wouldn't have peace with Egypt, and we wouldn't have peace with between Israel and Jordan. But we do because they had visionary leaders who could force things at their people. Now it's not full, it's not complete, but it's a hell of a lot better than the alternative. And so I think that for me the main missing ingredient, one that we saw with MBZ, for example, who was the variable in the Abraham Accords, but we haven't seen in some other circumstances, is leadership.
So I'm seated in the middle, and I'm going to take the middle of the road explanation. You definitely need leaders, and you definitely need grassroots. And I have seen it living in the region. The amazing change in the youth in the Emirates, the youth in Saudi Arabia, the youth even in Kuwait and in many other countries of the region. They have come, especially because of the internet and because of the social media. If you really analyze the social media coming from that region, you're going to see a tremendous change of heart. Youth that wants modernity, youth that wants relations with Israel, youth that wants technology. And so I think the approach is going to be coming from top to bottom and bottom to top. And that is what's going to make the peace in the future. If I may say, the difference between Egypt, Israel, Egypt, Jordan, and Egypt, the Abraham Accord, is that the leaders of Egypt and Jordan interest in the peace with Israel was most likely and most importantly security, stability of the regime, and money, right? And benefits from the United States. Now, the irony is that they use that to make peace with Israel, and then they use Israel as an external enemy to maintain the stability of their regime. Hosni Mubarak is the prototype of that example. He had 30 years to educate his population, if not to love the Jews and Israel, but to live at peace with Israel. And yet he did not. He allowed anti-Semitic propaganda, Israel propaganda, a series on television were against Israel, against the Jews. Only why? Because he needed to maintain his seat. And then when it was convenient for him, he ran for Israel for security, to the same thing with King Abdullah of Jordan. I mean, without Israel and the United States, Abdullah would have been gone long ago. It is the security that Israel provides to him, the intelligence that they provide to him. So he uses the peace to shore his, and yet at the same time, he uses anti-Israel rhetoric to shore up his position. That's very unfortunate, where it's much more different than the Abraham Accord.
Thank you. So, on behalf of everybody here, I'd like to thank the panel very much for a very special evening. I want to say something that's also very important, and we're discussing positive things, which is wonderful. On a summer institute dealing with hatred, we're talking about some positive developments, which is wonderful. And I know this is the William Prusoff Memorial Lecture. And I see Laura Prusoff's online and Professor Shinazi's online, who worked with Professor William Prusoff. So Bill Prusoff was a very optimistic, amazing man. He was a pharmacologist at Yale University who helped to create some of the first antiviral medication that was used to fight HIV. Him and his colleagues actually saved literally millions of people.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and Professor William Prusoff helped to start ISGAP. He was the first funder of ISGAP and was an amazing philanthropist and an extraordinarily humble guy. Despite making a fortune with the medications that he created, he would still go to Yale with a brown paper bag. He would make his own lunch and sit in his office. He would sit and eat with the janitors or the president of the university, always laughing. He was just an amazing man. And he helped to start ISGAP, and he passed a few years ago. He lived an amazing life, and it's really an honor that we're able to have a small memorial to remember his contribution, not just to ISGAP and the fight against anti-Semitism, but truly to humanity. And his daughter is online, and one of his colleagues that worked with him and was mentored by him. So it's special for those of us at ISGAP that we have this William Prusoff Memorial event every year. So, thank you. So now we go to the pub. And,
I just want to say goodbye. I won't be here tomorrow. I'm leaving tomorrow morning. It was a pleasure and an honor to be here. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Charles. It was a pleasure and honor to be here with you these 4 or 5
I
days.
forgot that you were going. It was an
Yes.
honor to be with you, and thank you for taking the time.